Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Oh boy, I am impressed. And Tim Swartz out there in Indiana, you know that I'm not easily impressed.
Oh, you're not?
I mean, no, I'm not. But tonight we have a fabulous show. We're covering that strange world of cryptids. Cryptids, you know, most people think of cryptozoology as Bigfoot, and more recently as perhaps a dog man. But today we have the king and the queen of cryptids. We have Mothman in one corner versus Champ in the other. And it's going to be a fabulous, fabulous show.
It's a cage match to the death.
Indeed it is, yeah. It's the Tuesday night SmackDown on Thursday. We've got, speaking to us from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the curator of the Mothman Museum, Jeff Wamsley. And Jeff, all right. And Jeff is not only the curator of the Mothman Museum, but he is also the head of the Mothman Festival. And Jeff, this year you're putting on another presentation, another festival. Lasts for how many days?
It's actually 2 days, September 17th and 18th. We're expecting a pretty good turnout this year. So.
And what's your average turnout? Because Point Pleasant isn't exactly the most metropolitan city in the world. Yes.
No, we usually double the population. I'd say we're looking probably at 10,000 this year.
Oh no, really? Oh my goodness, that's quite an event.
Yeah. No, it's grown every year. This will be our 15th festival, and it's grown and it's like a juggernaut, you know.
When I was in Point Pleasant. Shortly after the Silver Bridge collapsed,
right?
And it's a quaint little town.
Yeah,
and
hasn't changed a whole lot, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's still about the same.
Well, there was not the statue of Mothman in the middle of town.
Oh.
But we did talk to, I believe it was Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Ben Franklin. And we spoke about the curse of Chief Cornstalk.
Right.
And I've written about Mothman in several of my books. I don't claim to be the world's leading expert on it, but he's way up there on the popularity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And just to continue further, we have Steve Ward with us tonight, who was, I guess, started out as a... Well, Steve, going back to 1966, you were first became sort of interested in UFOs?
Well, I think I was introduced by the books of Frank Edwards, like so many of us. But then I was in junior high, and in 1966, we had Michigan was invaded by the alien hordes from outer space, and it was right in my backyard. I grew up just north of Detroit, but there were sightings all over Ann Arbor, Hillsdale, Dexter. And that, of course, is when Dr. J. Allen Hynek showed up and suggested that some of the sightings might be marsh gas. And then that opened up a whole new era.
I've had marsh gas all day. I'll tell you.
So it was really great for a kid that it was that, you know, I did like so many do. Hit the library, found all the books, and then the following November was the first appearance of Mothman, and the episode where he chased the two couples down Route 62 hit the wire services, so it went all over the world, really.
And when did you become introduced to that the flying creature?
Well, I think, of course, that was that first article, but over time, I became acquainted with the writings of John Keel, and I kept following his articles and his books and so forth. And occasionally, you would even see somebody, well, like even I remember Jim Moseley on the old Joe Pine show talking about the Mothman. And so it was always intriguing to me, and I always paid special attention to any mention that Keel made of. It took years for him to get the Mothman Prophecies book published, so for about a decade or so. So I kept watching for all the any information on the Mothman that John Keel would publish.
Well, now, how did you get, so to speak, tied up with the festival?
Well, actually, my first trip to Point Pleasant was in 1977 because I had read the Mothman Prophecies and really wanted to see what the area looked like. And so I drove down there one fateful weekend, and didn't really bother anybody. It was only about 10 years after the bridge collapse, and I didn't really want to happen onto somebody that might have lost a friend or family member in the tragedy. And and that was a pretty amazing experience. But I didn't do too much. I went to the old North Power Plant, was still standing. I was able to drive back into the infamous TNT area where Mothman was first sighted, back before they had all the barriers up and everything. So then it was a long dry period. It was almost 29 years. And one fateful day, no pun intended, remember how Fate magazine goes through and lists all the upcoming events that people might be interested in? Well, there was the Mothman Festival. And I said to my wife, man, I'd really love to go to this. So she went and made reservations for us at the Lowe Hotel, and that was 2006. And the rest is history. I mean, it was just a great experience. The speakers, you've got all this great geography, the vendors. It's just for somebody that's interested in UFOs or the paranormal, it's the absolute perfect place to be.
Well, it certainly has grown in size, and now it's known worldwide. Actually, what's the furthest distance that someone has come that you're aware of?
Well, actually, Jeff's daughter, I think, didn't Ashley post some of those on the internet?
Yeah, they come from all over the world. I mean, they're we just can't keep track. I mean, it's Germany, Japan. We just had a guy in here just visiting the museum, from Australia, just a few weeks ago and stuff. So,
Jeff, just the other day, this might be updated by now, but she posted for this coming festival, the top three were Anchorage, Alaska, New Zealand, and Norway will be attending this year.
Oh yeah.
Well, don't think though that Point Pleasant has everything, because we're also going to be traveling to Lake Champlain tonight to speak with Kate Elizabeth, who is known as the Lake Monster Queen. She is the CEO and founder of Champ Search, the only full-time organization in the world dedicated to identifying and, most importantly, protecting the unique animals that have apparently thrived in Lake Champlain, Lake Willoughby, and Lake... help me with this one now.
Memphremagog.
Boy. A biblical name, if there ever was one, yes. I would imagine that's a Native American name.
Yes, it's very tough to even read. I had to learn it from the locals, or else I would have done the same thing.
and that is what we know. Lake Champlain actually is in upstate New York, and it borders on Vermont.
Yeah, it actually is between New York and Vermont.
And Lake Willoughby and Infamdago is where.
Lake Memphremagog actually is mostly in Canada, but it goes into Vermont.
And are the lakes are not linked up? I mean, right? I mean, it's not like Champ is going from one to the other.
Well, I can probably talk about that after if you want to hear about that. There's a lot of on-land sightings that I have a theory about. They might be going from lake to lake. And particularly in that region as well, the glaciers cut through, and I think that these animals are, definitely remnants of that time.
Well, I think you and I probably share the same roots to our interest in Champ. Wasn't it a segment of In Search of?
It was actually Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, Unsolved Mysteries. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember seeing some of the early film that were taken of something perhaps moving in the water. But I must say that I am impressed because you have not one but several videos of what could be Champ. But let's go back to the beginning. You're a young, very attractive lady. How in God's name did you ever get involved in this? I mean, other than watching a TV show. I mean, we all watch TV shows, but we don't go out the next day and decide to, devote a good portion of our lives to what we've just seen.
Well, excuse me. It did start when I was 7, and I was watching Unsolved Mysteries, and I remember seeing this famous Sandra Mancy photo from 1977, and I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, I want to go to Lake Champlain, and she's like, why? What the heck? What are you watching on TV? And I told her, I'm like, I'm pointing to the screen, I'm jumping up and down like a crazy kid that I was, which I still am. And I said, Mom, there's a dinosaur in Vermont. And she's like, are you crazy? I said, well, I want to go there one day. And she's like, well, find out how far away it is. So I pulled out the old Rand McNally map before we had GPS back in the day. And I said, well, it's about 4.5 hours or so. And she's like, oh, you're crazy. I'm not driving that far. So I was kind of crushed. I was like, oh man, this sucks, And I had, at that point, I went to my local library at my elementary school, and I asked the librarian if there was any books on lake monsters, and she kind of gave me a strange look. I still get that look to this day, occasionally. And they had a lot of books on Nessie, and, there really wasn't anything on Champ. And then, I mean, there's like a couple books, but nothing really big. I believe one of the books was by Joseph Zarzinski, who used to investigate Champ back in the 70s and 80s as well. And,
I was on the radio going back after I had returned from Loch Ness. This would have been in the early 1980s. I was on the radio. It just turned out I didn't even remember this. We had Paul Bartholomew on. Was it last week, Tim, or the week before? Week before last. And yes. He lives up in upstate New York and has investigated Bigfoot. And he reminded me that he and I were on the same show together with Dan Fangboner, who was the curator of the Lake George Museum, Historical Society, or whatever, and we talked about Champ. Of course, I have very little recollection of that conversation. I have very little recollection of most conversations going back 35 years, but apparently, we discussed that topic on some radio show. We think maybe Candy Jones, who was the successor to Long John Neville, but we don't know for sure. But I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, sometimes I just chatter away insistently. Tim, what do you think about all this? I mean, have you studied either A Creature of the Night?
Oh, well, yes, definitely. I mean, lake monsters and Mothman have been, two of my favorite types of cryptids for a long time. And I just wanted to say to Katy that you mentioned the Mancy photograph. And I think out of all of the photographs that I have seen, I mean, not just with Lake Champlain, but, other so-called lake monsters, that has to be one of the most compelling photographs out there. And yet there are still debunkers who, they seem to bend over backwards trying to come up with various, to me, rather absurd explanations for that photograph.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how people say it's a log and things like that. I've had several different sightings of these animals. I had people say, "Oh, you're crazy, you haven't," and I'm like, you know what? I don't care what you think. I've got video. I also have audio recordings that we have captured with our hydrophone system of 3 individual animals just in the Button Bay area, where we do our research mostly in the Button Bay area of the lake. And we go, we're going to do some more stuff more towards the northern part of the lake, near the Hero Islands and things like that. But I mean, it's just one of those things that you have to see it to really believe it. And I've always believed it growing up, but once I had my experience, my first sighting, I was like, oh my God, I really didn't believe it. There's just a big comparison. There really is.
Now, those audio recordings that you were referring to, I mean, those are rather unique. I mean, I don't think anybody has ever maybe even attempted, say like Loch Ness, trying to get the same thing. But the recordings that you got seem to indicate that there's definitely some things in there, and possibly, not a reptile, but mammals.
Well, the thing about the whole mammal idea, and I always, when I started this, I had thought maybe that this animal was some type of whale, possibly a zeuglodon. The problem with that is they would be more social, and they would also be coming up for air all the time too. Whatever this animal is, it possesses reptilian and amphibious type of traits. Whether it's a hybrid, you can call it a plesiosaur, you can call it, a Tanystropheus. There's all these different ideas. I don't care. There's no name to put on Champ. I mean, until we find one, a carcass of one, or until we find some sort of fossil, we really don't know what they are. They could be a completely different, species of animal.
Well, do you think it's related to other lake monsters, say like, the Loch Ness Monster, seen around the world?
I do. A lot of similarities between the on-land sightings of Champ and Nessie, as well as Ogopogo. There's a lot of very similar scenarios with that. Basically, mostly at night, the nocturnal trait that they have. When I got my recordings, they went from 7 p.m. to about, I think it was 1:30 in the morning, because I stayed overnight in the boat. And I'll tell you what, you don't want to do that out there. It's pitch black. You can't see a darn thing. And if you're by yourself, I guarantee if you were by yourself, you'd be at the dock pretty quick when you hear 3 of them communicating back and forth. And that to me indicates that these animals are highly active at night. And, that's probably the time that they're out, doing their thing mostly. I mean, they're out during the day as well, but alligators are the same way. Most of the time when they feed is at night, during dusk, and also in the morning, bright early in the morning. I've never had a sighting bright early in the morning. There was a video that I captured when I first started this, and I'm not quite sure. It's kind of questionable. It could be fish. It doesn't look like fish to me, but it was in a very shallow part of the lake. And it was early in the morning. I think it was like 6:30 or something. I get up very early if I do go to sleep when I do this stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, I just think that they're mostly nocturnal. The on-land sightings where people have seen, there was one sighting, I don't even know the person's name. A lot of people want to remain anonymous because they don't want to be ridiculed, of course.
Sure.
There was an individual driving down Route 9N in New York over near Port Henry, which is the home of Champ. Granted, I really don't do my work over there as much because the lake has warmed up quite a bit with this global warming thing, and it seems to be that most of the sightings are from the Button Bay area where I do my research, and then further north now. It's almost like they're getting pushed to the more northern part of the lake now. Maybe in 10 years they'll probably be all the way up at the top. Who knows, with everything warming up. But yeah, there was a sighting. Someone was driving down 9N. I think it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And this long, dark creature ran across the road. It didn't flop across the road, if it had flippers like the plesiosaur idea. I don't know. I mean, nobody really knows, but you could kind of compare it to a sea turtle, the morphology of with the flippers. But they said it ran across the road and went down into the lake. So I mean, who knows? And there's many sightings that I have the same exact thing. There was a guy on an ATV, and it was, I think, it was probably around midnight or something. He was just messing around. His friends were out with him and stuff, and he was driving down a dirt towpath right along Otter Creek, which runs into Lake Champlain. And it's a very marshy, there's so much marshland. I mean, there could be hundreds of them hiding out there and camouflage as well. And you wouldn't see them, because you look at, alligators and frogs and things like that. Frogs are amphibians, but they have that ability, like chameleon, to blend right in with their surroundings. So there's plenty of places for them to hide. They've done a damn good job. I'll put it that way. But yeah, I mean, that one with one running across the towpath, he's seen this dark, long animal around 15 feet in length, and all of a sudden he felt like this thud. I guess he was cruising along pretty fast, and he, stopped. He went to look, and there was an indentation, and it looked like a tail indentation in the sand. And there was also actually a few footprints. So that right there is the indication that it has like a type of webbed foot. But we just don't know. It's just one of those things everybody argues about. And I'm like, whatever. It's got feet. It's got flippers. It's there. I really don't care either way.
Well, that's very reminiscent, though, of the lake creatures that have been seen on land, especially. Well, I mean, there's been some reports around Loch Ness, but also in the small peat lakes in Ireland and Scotland, where people have seen creatures that seem to be too big for the individual lakes. But then there's reports that they see these creatures moving from one small lake to the other.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense. I do a lot of study on Google Earth, believe it or not. I go on there a lot, and I look at the various lochs over there in Scotland, all around Loch Ness, and there are reports. There's Morag, which is Loch Morar, which is right near Loch Ness. So, I mean, like I said, it's possible that these animals are very much like turtles. They're just going wherever they feel comfortable temperature-wise. So, that explains why if they do a side scan sonar in Loch Ness, with there's that whole Operation Deep Scan that they did, and they didn't find anything, and that might be why. I mean, we just don't know.
We have so much territory to cover this evening, and two very fascinating subjects, and quite a few fascinating guests. But we are coming up on our first break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Jeff about the history of Mothman. And you're listening to Exploring the Bizarre with Tim and Tim.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Has anybody seen my scuba gear? That's what I want to know. Actually,
I would never ever go scuba diving in some place that has, Loch Ness or Lake Champlain. The thought of that just gives me the willies.
Well, I like the idea that it's Lake Champlain, that's for sure. But I actually may visit up around that area this summer, but I'm taking a few days off next week, and I'm going with my buddy April. We're going to Peekskill, to up near Bear Mountain, and I believe April is going to go kayaking. I'm not quite the athletic type, but
oh, sweet! But I go kayaking all the time, Tim, and
Do you?
it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't require that much effort.
Well, I'm not quite as young as I used to be. I might be. Well, I won't say that I'm as old as Champ. By the way, how old is Champ?
It's kind of hard to tell. It's been there a long time. I mean, there's sightings that have gone back to the native Abenaki and Iroquois tribes, and they basically they would go out in their canoes and they would place offerings in the water. I guess maybe tobacco. I don't know, whatever they had to
It's
appease them.
it's all a smoking experience. Well,
But just to make it clear to our audience, so I mean, we're not talking about a singular creature here. We're talking about, like a species. I mean, there's like a family out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I just by the recordings that I've captured, there was 3 animals just in the Button Bay area. If you guys can go on Google Earth, you can type in Button Bay, Lake Champlain, it'll pop up, and you can see that small area of a 120-mile long lake. So you multiply that by how many, that many miles, and that'll kind of give you a little rough estimate on how many there really are. So there's not one wretched creature that's been around for millennia. That's a little absurd. A lot of people say, oh, there's one champ, and I'm like, are you kidding me? It's lasted this long, and say 10 o'clock in the morning, you'll see him down in Button Bay, and then 11 o'clock, you'll see him, up in Plattsburgh area, which is in the northern part of the lake. So there's just no way that there's one. And there's also been multiple animals seen. I do have a couple videos that I have not released yet of 3 of them surfacing in Button Bay. So it's pretty interesting that they seem to travel in groups, pod-like type of things. Another mammal trait. It's just the whole, coming up to breathe for air thing, and them being, mammal would be social. So they have really amazing traits, these animals, whatever they are. So
now you have become actually the champ of champ, because you've actually decided to protect the species. Now, how did you become involved in that? Tell us a little bit about your group, the Champ Search.
Well, basically in 2012, I decided to finally go up to Lake Champlain. I was a paranormal investigator for a long time. And I had a lot of experiences with that, and I kind of got freaked out with a couple of things. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore, even though I do miss it, and I probably will do it again eventually. But I decided to go on a trip. I wanted to go on a trip somewhere, and I was just sitting watching TV and watching a documentary on lake monsters. I can't remember. I think Is It Real or something like that. I think it was National Geographic. And I was watching that, another show that, lit a bulb up in my head. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do my dream. I'm going to go up there and try to figure this out. And I never had any anticipation of seeing a darn thing. And I can't believe how lucky I was to have my own sighting. And I was also with 3 other people that saw the same thing too. So it's not like I was crazy at the time. And I saw a hump surface in Button Bay. It was probably around 11:30 in the morning when I was eating breakfast. And actually, that was a morning sighting, which was very strange because I haven't had one since. And it moved casually across the bay. And I've grown up on the water my whole life. I live in Rhode Island.
Kind of Breakfast of Champions.
Yes, it was. Yes. A lot better than Wheaties. It was Champies this time.
Well,
so
why is there such a discrimination against? I mean, I can see Mothman. We're going to talk to Jeff in just a few minutes. I mean, Mothman. It's a hairy situation. I mean, he's a big kind of like he doesn't belong. But a sea serpent or a lake monster, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't seem, at least in my way of thinking, doesn't seem quite that bizarre to think that there may be other species of creatures living in the water. Why is it that suddenly when you mention, I mean, your videos should be analyzed and scrutinized by some of the top people in academia, and I have a feeling they haven't been.
It's one of those things, you send something and they'll say, well, I don't see a head and neck, so it's just a fish. They always jump to that conclusion, and with growing up on the water, I've never seen anything like it move that way. I mean, in a caterpillar-like crawl is the most common movement of Champ, and I don't know, I just think that the scientific community has their butt stuck in the mud, in other words. They don't want to be wrong, and, until we can prove this to the scientific community, that's the way it's going to be. And who's going to get all the credit? They're going to get all the credit, probably. So, but the thing that throws the whole Champ thing or any other lake monster thing off, I have to say, is the size. People think that you say lake monster or sea serpent, that it's going to be 100-foot long creature, and they're not. The common size of Champ is usually, they can range from 12 feet all the way to 40 feet at the most. That's a very, very large specimen of a Champ animal that I've ever heard, which means it most likely is very old. If it is reptilian, because you think of snapping turtles, you think of alligators. The bigger they are, the older they are. And I think that's what it is. People think it's this 100-foot long creature in this puny little lake. And if you've ever been on Lake Champlain in a boat, which I go 45 miles per hour sometimes, kind of raising hell, and it's like, oh, there's an island there, I'm gonna get there in about a minute, and like 10 minutes goes by and you're like, are you kidding me? I'm still not there yet. It's just such a massive body of water. So I think that's the thing, that people think that this animal is this massive, massive thing, and they're not. So I think that's what throws a lot of people off, to think it's a crazy, bogus idea.
Hey, Katy, before we go and talk to about Mothman, we got a question here from Larry from Vegas, and he wanted to know if Champ and Loch Ness have been around for so long, why haven't any bones been found in the area?
Well, that is a good question. I've wondered it myself, doing this for so long. I think, one of the ideas that I have, no one's an expert at this stuff, but one of the ideas that I have is that the water is so cold, and if there's been cases of people hitting these animals with boats, not very often, thank God, and I hope it doesn't happen to me, unless maybe that's a definitive proof, but I don't want to hurt Champ. We're out to protect it. But I think there's been times where people have hit one and they turn around to look and see what they hit, and it's gone. So most likely it's sunk to the bottom, and down there it's cold, and it's probably, it depends on where in the lake it is. If it's very deep, it would be very cold, and it would get preserved and gelled at the bottom. There could be underwater caves that they're going into, just like any animal has this type of, like say cats or whatever, for an example, when they feel like their time is up, they'll run, they'll take off and they'll go and die somewhere. So we really don't know. One of the other ideas that I have, this is probably the one I believe in the most, is that, they probably bury themselves in the mud like snapping turtles do. Mm-hmm. And then just, how many times do you find a dead turtle? Not very often. So
only when they're crossing the road.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't been lucky enough to have that type of sighting yet. But at night, when I'm driving around the lake, I'm like, oh, come on, Champ, are you coming out? Get out there. So, but yeah, those are just a few ideas that I have about why, no bones have been found. I am sure that there is many, fossilized remains around the lake. There are fossils from thousands of years ago. It's Lake Champlain's home to the oldest coral reef in the world. So that tells you right there the immense historical geology that Lake Champlain has. So, but those are a few ideas that that I believe could be a possibility.
All right. Well, Tim, why don't let's bring Jeff into the conversation and shift the gears a little bit towards Mothman. And so Jeff, I imagine that practically everybody in the audience knows about Mothman. At least I hope they do. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of Mothman from your perspective? You grew up there in Point Pleasant, and I'm sure that you may have kind of a different outlook on the whole situation than, say, like even John Keel. He came there from New York, and he got to know people quite well there, but it's still, he didn't come from there. So, what's your perspective of the whole Mothman phenomena?
Well, like I had mentioned in that bio piece there, I was only 5 years old when it happened here in Point Pleasant, and our neighbors were some of the people that were in the car the first night. And, I was too young to remember, but as I got a little bit older and started, I picked up John Keel's book, I think when I was in junior high or high school, and leafing through the book and started, recognizing a lot of the names in the book. And I thought, well, I know these people. They live right down the street, and so I got into the record store business, and had a few Mothman shirts here and there, and started thinking, it'd be cool to come up with a book that told the real story. And this was before the movie was announced, with Richard Gere and stuff like that. But in a nutshell, back in '66, you had the two young couples were riding around late November 15th, 1966 to be exact, up in the TNT area. A lot of people still go to the TNT area. Steve mentioned visiting up there back in '77 and stuff. But TNT area during World War II was an ammunitions depot where they manufactured TNT for the war effort. And when the war ended, they pretty much pulled out of that area. The government just left all the buildings and all the bunkers and all that kind of stuff. And then during the '60s, the National Guard, where my dad actually worked, they kind of had control over that TNT area and stuff. But it was and still is, kind of like a lover's lane. People go up there and drag race and hot rod and, park with the girlfriends and stuff like that. But what they were up there for that night was a drag race, and they were in a '57 Chevy, and they claimed that they were getting ready to come home, and they saw a tall, dark figure standing in the road. They just thought it was a person or a man or whatever standing in the road. But as they got closer to it, they saw the wings come out, and they realized that it wasn't a man. They thought maybe it was some sort of an animal or something. But then they got a little closer to it and described the two red eyes about the size of baseballs. The wingspan 10 to 12 feet, and it awkwardly ran towards one of the old buildings, the North Power Plant up there. Linda had told me in several interviews and what it acted like and how it ran and things like that. Very awkward. And that was the beginning. Naturally, they went to the sheriff's department and sit down, and they were upset. They were scared, and of course they thought they were going to get laughed at, which they did. And they split them up, put them in separate rooms, and told them to write down their depositions as to what they had witnessed, which we have here in the museum. We have 3 of those 4 handwritten depositions here in the museum and stuff. And so that was the beginning. And a lot of people, just like with the Champ story and everything, there's a lot of skeptics, and that's fine. There were theories that it was just nothing but more than a turkey buzzard or a sandhill crane. But you had over 100 reported sightings within a year and a half, 66 through 67. And a lot of those sightings weren't just, teenage kids. They were prominent business people. You mentioned Ben Franklin. He met with John Keel and Mosley and some of those guys, when they came to town.
Yeah, well, I think I was down on that trip.
You were.
With Mosley. Yeah. In fact,
I've
I
got
don't
a
know.
poster here in the museum of Ben Franklin. He was the high school principal when my mother was in high school, and he was a magician, a well-known magician and stuff. But
I wrote an article. I wrote an article for a now long since defunct magazine called Beyond, which had a lot of the photographs that I took of after the collapse of the bridge and all. Well, give us a description. What's your best description of Mothman?
7 foot tall, grayish in color, head shrunken down into the shoulders, almost sunken down. The 2 red eyes were prominent. I've talked to a lot of people and asked them if they've seen any type of facial features and stuff, and they said they were pretty much riveted to those eyes. That's what caught their attention. Kind of awkward the way it ran. And of course, a lot of people seen it, in the air. I mean, people were chased in their cars.
I think, did it also chase an airplane?
Yeah, I was getting ready to mention that across the river here in Gouth List, just across the river, Everett Wedge. He's passed on, but they thought they seen it. They seen it. They just thought it was a plane coming in that was in trouble. That's how big the wingspan was on it. And then they said as it got closer, they thought, well, it's a bird of some sort, but it's enormous. So they actually got in a plane and tried to track it, chase it, and it went back up towards and crossed the river to where the TNT area is. And so a lot of people thought, that TNT area was maybe a roosting area or a habitat that, this thing was hanging out and staying or living or whatever.
But no known photographs of Mothman.
No, just eyewitness descriptions. There's a few artist renderings. No bones, just like with the Champ question. A lot of those questions sound the same. It
came and it went.
It came and it went. The movie portrayed a lot of those sightings ending when that bridge fell, but I've talked to people, that were seeing stuff in the 70s, even the early 80s. I don't think that as soon as the bridge abruptly collapsed that everything disappeared and stuff. I think it went on for a while,
Well, now, did you knew John Keel? I don't think he ever went down for a festival, right?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, he did?
Actually,
okay.
I met him when I did my first book because I had to get his permission to use a lot of those hand-typed letters that he sent to Linda Scarberry and her mother and stuff like that. So he actually came in 2003. That was before I had the museum, but we did the first festival in 2002. He caught wind of it, and then that's how I met him. We talked him into. He actually drove down here by himself, and he came to the festival in 2003. But he came back on a couple other occasions just to visit. So I was lucky enough to be able to meet with him, and then we had several phone conversations here and there and stuff too.
Well,
he always liked to talk about everything but Mothman on the phone.
Well,
I think he was worn out.
I knew John for many years. I guess he had just come back. I guess when I first met him, he had just come back from Point Pleasant, and he talked about. In fact, I met Mary Heyer. I believe she must have come to New York with him. We used to. I was involved with Jim Mosley's little group that met on. Well, he claims it was only once a month, but it seemed like it was more frequent than that. He would rent a seedy little hotel room, like a banquet room, around Times Square, and every week or a couple of weeks, he would present a different speaker. In those days, people actually went to, meetings, things like that. And Keel showed up, and I think we had a conversation, and he had some weird experiences. In fact, Steve, can you tell us some of the things that happened to John when he was in the Point Pleasant area?
And when he initially went down to investigate the Mothman?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, he went down, and the people were very forthcoming. They called people over, and they all gathered in somebody's house so he could ask a lot of questions.
That was on our street, 30th Street.
Oh, was it? Yeah. You were Linda Scarberry's paper boy, weren't you?
Yeah, that was when I was in high school. But they did meet. They met at her parents' house, which is right there on 30th Street. Yep.
And so they, the two couples told them their story, and they went out to the North Power Plant to see what they could see. And everybody went out there at first kind of in good spirits. And all of a sudden, one of the ladies started screaming and said that she saw the red eyes. And Keel didn't see anything. And a couple of the other people started to get hysterical. And then somebody thought they saw some kind of shadow move somewhere. And now Keel didn't see any of this. But he and Mary Heyer were talking about it and thought the atmosphere was very oppressive. So anyway, and they also had one of the sheriff come out to check things out. And everybody was pretty freaked out. So they all went back. And then John Keel went back by himself. And this is where he talks about that famous incident about the zone of fear that he walks through. He's out somewhere in the middle of nowhere in the TNT area. Excuse me. And all of a sudden, he walks through a particular, like a geographical spot, a very specific spot, and this really wave of fear overcame him. And then when he got through it, just through the edge of it, it stopped. Well, his theory was that he was being bombarded with some kind of, I think he said, microwaves or some kind of radiation from some source. When he went back the next day, it was gone. It was interesting because Colin Wilson weighed in on that incident, the famous researcher, and he thought that John Keel encountered what he called a ghoul, or a feeling of dread. That this is kind of a term, I guess, T.C. Lethbridge coined. But as opposed to a ghost or apparition, this was some kind of a feeling of dread that he thought just may have been associated with the Mothman or some of the strange things going on there. But John never did see the Mothman.
But he did have some strange telephone calls.
Oh,
in the middle of
yes.
the night.
Oh, sure. He had stuff plague him all the way back to New York. He would get calls from people. This gets into the Men in Black, where people were. They said, these strange characters are here, and he'd rush out there to try and intercept them, and he'd miss them by 10 or 15 minutes. He had just amazing problems with his phone. Mysterious beeps, strange voices. His mail was tampered with. He was also in contact with several what he called silent contactees, individuals that firmly believed they were in contact with some kind of an entity and were being given some kind of quest or purpose. And they were really, so Keel was in contact with these individuals, really trying to help them through some very trying times. There were all kinds of bizarre things that circled around the Mothman, not just the sightings of the creature.
Well, now, reporter Mary Heyer, she was a editor, was it at the Athens Gazette?
Athens Messenger, I think. Is that right?
Messenger. My memory fades.
Oh, and she wrote
wrote
a column called "Where the Waters Mingle," which referred to the Ohio now.
But she had
her office was here in Point Pleasant.
Right on 6th Street, where the bridge used to empty on, I think. Right.
Oh, speaking of bridges, we're going to have to bridge over troubled waters here, and we have a break coming up, and then we'll be back with more cryptids, those that fly and those that swim. And join us and call us and text us and chat with us and carry on.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
The Exploring the Bizarre living room is really getting full. We've got some very strange people sitting around here, and we've been having a great conversation about cryptids. We've got Jeff Wamsley, who is the curator of the Mothman Museum down in Point Pleasant, who will be having his, celebrating actually the 50th anniversary of the appearance of the Mothman on September 17th and 18th, is it?
Correct.
Yep. All right. Hey, boy, oh boy, what a memory. We have Steve Ward, who is an all-around researcher on the Fortean, I would say Fortean phenomenon. Is that how you describe yourself, Steve?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would say so. And the world's leading expert on marsh gas.
In all forms.
Yes, indeed. And we have the Lake Monster Queen, Kate Elizabeth, who is a firm supporter and believer in Champ and other lake serpents in upstate Vermont, New York, and parts of Canada. And now we have with us, direct from Atlanta, Georgia, my longtime buddy. Well, let's see if we say that after the show. But my longtime friend, Allen Greenfield, who actually wrote the forward to Gray Barker's Silver Bridge.
Both times.
Huh?
Both editions. The
Both
first
editions, yes.
in his lifetime, and then the second edition, much more recent and a better introduction. I was just a kid when I wrote the first one.
Well, you're still a kid, at least at heart. But okay, Alan, let's go back to 1967 or thereabouts. Were you involved in Mothman in those days?
Oh yeah. In fact, I may have had a bit to do with getting John Keel involved in it. I persuaded my dad, AKA the money bags of the family, to fly Keel in to speak to our local UFO group in November 1967 to a packed house in the sky room of the Decatur Federal Building in Decatur, Georgia.
I know. I lectured there for your group as well at some point.
To a somewhat smaller house, but still, the enthusiasm was enormous for you. Anyway, John said that we were going to fly him back to New York, and John said, no, I'd like to rent a car and go to West Virginia and check this stuff out there. And I said, okay, that can be arranged. So he was off for West Virginia, and subsequent events, I'm not sure that was his first visit to Mothman area, but that was right in the heart of the events. And after that, he could talk about little else. Plus, Jim Mosley and Gray Barker were filling me in continuously. And then, of course, the next year, I think it was the next year. No, it was 2 years later, when things had started to taper off somewhat. We had our annual convention in Charleston, West Virginia, and even had our own Man in Black in training, as he put it, or actually, as he put it, Man in Black in training, following us around at the convention. Some say he was a Gray Barker plant. Some say. However, he showed up in other locations years later, and he was still the pasty-faced young kid, which sort of defies reality. So I would say that that it was not a Barker hoax, although that's always a possibility.
Well,
How he stayed young.
Usually, if it's a Barker hoax, it would come out later on.
Yes, and it would come out to me. I mean, Gray didn't conceal stuff from me after the fact, but and also Barker hoaxes tended to be either in writing or on the phone. So showing up in that particular, also it would have shown up in the Silver Bridge because really the Silver Bridge is the stoned version of the Mothman prophecy, in my opinion. It's what the Mothman prophecy would have been if Keel wasn't so straight-laced, which even with his bizarre ideas, which I think were very close to the truth, amazingly close to the truth, bizarrely close to the truth, nevertheless, he was a men's magazine writer and a straight-laced reporter with a very, very dry sense of humor, and not much in the way of the kind of bizarre antics that Barker and Mosley would do. It does complicate trying to sort out the realities from the fictions, but nevertheless, I think there's a lot of signal amidst the noise. In fact, I would say that during the peak of the Mothman period, the signal outweighed the noise being defined as mistakes, mistaken identity, various hoaxy type things, and of course, Barker Mosley hoaxes. It was mostly real. For a while, it seemed like the Point Pleasant area and surrounding areas extending over the bridge, the ill-fated bridge into Ohio, sort of became part of otherwhere. There were cryptids like Mothman, and there were men in black running all over the place, and there were a lot of UFO reports, and there were contact cases, and just the entire range of things you would expect from a blending of our reality with another reality. It was a treasure trove. Well, not the Alan, first and not the last. Yes, Tim.
Well, Alan, do you ever have a Mothman sighting of your own?
No, I've never really. I've seen a ghost and I heard a ghost on different occasions, but I've never had a good cryptid or UFO case. Just some very, 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 very minor stuff where that's concerned. Mm-hmm. But I do have a report that probably you're not aware of. Well, you may be if you happen to look at my blog tonight, because I sort of anticipated this. But there was, as you may recall, a very tragic bridge disaster in Minneapolis several years ago. And they kept referring to it by the name of the highway, I something or other, with no names attached or whatever. It was like the Silver Bridge, it was a catastrophic event. So I did analysis with the Ufonaut cipher that I have written about so hopefully famously, or at least I would like to think so. And it said, sighting 2 days hence. And so I looked around the Minneapolis, St. Paul newspapers, and sure enough, 2 days later, there was a multi-witness sighting, but it wasn't of a UFO in the usual sense. It was of a Mothman type creature, and actually having the same description from the observers, the percipients, who probably had never heard of Mothman, as in the West Virginia, Ohio cases. At least that would be my guess. That was basically the same description that was given in the Mothman cases in and around the Silver Bridge at the time of the preceding the disaster. So that's the most recent major bridge disaster in this country. Of course, if we don't fix our infrastructure, there will probably be lots more Mothmen coming to toll the bell for those who are on the bridge at the time the bridges collapse. Most of our bridges are in woeful condition, and nobody's doing anything about it.
Yeah, good luck with that, getting them fixed, right?
Depends on what happens in our next election. But I'm not going to display my bias for Hillary Clinton here.
All right. Well, now that brings up the question then, Alan. Since you were able to use your cipher to look into that other bridge collapse, when it comes to Mothman, then we're not dealing with and I know it's such a gray area. We're not dealing with a physical creature here. I mean, not at least as far as we know, a flesh and blood creature. We're dealing with something else.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's true with the Men in Black. It's true with the UFOs. It's true with the humanoid creatures, and it's certainly true with things like the Braxton Monster and with Mothman. They're not animals or people or beings in the sense that we usually understand those terms. My very firm opinion is they are manifestations of otherwhere, no different than those found in ghost lore, fairy lore, etc. That's sort of my major understanding. You know, I know your listeners will not realize this, but I'm actually talking to a man who has a mirrored ball on his head in terms of your picture, Tim. And it's so hard to be serious with a human body and a mirrored ball from a disco or from the 1920s, probably both, for a head. I mean, you want to talk about weird creatures from time and space, to borrow the term from one of Keel's books, which you mentioned me in. Not that I, keep track of that sort of thing. It's very difficult.
If you look deeply into it, you'll see your past, present, and future simultaneously.
Well, you've brought up sort of, Alan, a bone of contention here, whether these cryptoids, whether we're talking about Mothman or Champ or Dogman, who seems to lead the pack at the moment in popularity,
so to speak.
Whether they are physical creatures or some manifestation of the dark side of non-reality or reality. What do you say, Jeff, as far as that goes? I mean, you talked to quite a number of the original witnesses. Are we talking about a creature, flesh and blood creature, or are we talking about something of a supernormal nature?
Well, it tended to be more towards a creature for the people that I talked to, but there were a few that lean more towards a spiritual entity. I mean, almost a religious type approach to it. But those original witnesses like Linda and the others and stuff, they saw it. It ran in front of their car. It ran through the field towards the building. But there were a few other people that I had talked to that saw this image, inside their home. I mean, almost like a just a vision, and then then the religious stuff came into it. Some weird stuff.
The thing is, with the very physical looking ones, nobody ever catches them. And that would lead me to believe that lake monsters, that the ones that are most credible as physical creatures, the plesiosaur type thing, whatever, like the Loch Ness Monster, they're always 2 steps away from us. And a physical creature in a limited area ought to be findable, dare I say, catchable.
But if you're talking about Loch Ness or Lake Champlain, for example, you're talking about a huge body of water. Wouldn't you say that, Kate? I mean, we're not talking about a small lake. How many square miles does Lake Champlain encompass?
It's 120 miles long, so it's pretty big. I mean, it's one of those things where a lot of people, they just hear lake and they think it's basically like a pond, and it isn't. It's just massively huge, 400 feet at the deepest, and I'm sure there's deeper parts that have not been cataloged. I mean, there's all kinds of underwater caves, and I know scuba divers that have dove in Champlain, which I would like to learn how to scuba dive, but now with knowing what Champ looks like, I'm kind of like, I don't think it's the greatest idea in the world. But it is a massive, massive body of water. So it's, like I said, it's not a small area. And also these animals are very, very fast. I mean, I had captured one video where I had seen something that was close to shore. So I was keeping my eye on it with, basically focus with the camera. And I did else, and then later on, going over the footage, there was a creature in the background, way off in the background between an island and a peninsula, and it was fast, and I had to slow down the video like crazy just to even see. I mean, I just saw this little thing come up. I said, "What the heck is that?" And then I slowed it down. I said, "Boy, he was cruising real sneaky," So they have a defense mechanism. That's why they've survived this long and also avoided humans this long. So, I mean, we're really close, I believe, to figuring this out with the recordings and things like that. So I'm hoping that we will figure this out eventually so we can get national protection for Champ, not just local protection.
Now, what do you? So, do you think that there's any possibility? Well, how intelligent is Champ? I mean, would you say that he's a cut above other seafaring creatures?
I mean, in my opinion, with the recordings that I've captured, a lot of the recordings that I have are indicative of echolocation, which is biosonar, what dolphins and whales give off. And as you know, dolphins and whales are highly intelligent animals. So if this thing is echolocating, sure as anything, it's very intelligent.
Well, it is interesting though. Then I guess you don't put any supernatural see any supernatural elements to this.
It's funny. At first I did. I mean, anything's possible. I've had a lot of weird experiences in my life with the paranormal. I have gotten EVPs and had experiences, so anything is possible. There have been, I haven't really heard details, but there have been a few UFO sightings in the area, just like at Loch Ness. I've heard of a
yeah.
few.
Oh, yes. Well, one of your videos, I think it's the second one. I sent a link over to Peter, who puts up our YouTube episodes of Exploring the Bizarre, and he says to me, this looks more like a UFO than it does a sea creature of any kind, and it does appear to be a very bright object, either on top of the water or slightly above it. Are you? It looks like a disc almost.
Yeah, it's I think that's the one that goes left to right really sporadically. Is that the video that you're talking about?
Yes, I think so. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That day it was extremely hot, and I had my convertible top down. I had to put it back up because I couldn't stand it. I couldn't even see through the viewfinder of the camcorder that I had, and I could barely see something. And I said, well, it's probably a fish, but I'm going to film it anyway. And I just find it really fascinating how fast it moves so rapidly through the water, and then if you actually slow it down, you can see little knobs at the surface. I mean, it could be a sturgeon, I don't know, but the way it's swimming is just not typical fish behavior, going back and forth that quick. And to talk about the idea, of Champ being extremely intelligent, I have a really cool story it was 1972. One of my favorite stories, and about scuba diving too. There was a couple of scuba divers that were searching for a sunken boat, and one of the scuba divers motioned to the other that he saw something, and he's like, "What the heck?" So they popped to the surface, and when they did, Champ came up and looked right at the two men, and they were freaking out, of course. And they said that he cocked his head to the side, much like a dog does. So that right there, I mean, it's just the total personality right there of, imagine that, just Champ going, huh? That whole, huh? So.
Well, now back in the early 1980s, I was invited to speak at a little UFO, unofficial UFO group that was part of the House of Lords. I was invited over by my friend, the 7th Earl of Clancarty, Brinsley of the Port Trench. And after giving a little presentation to all these lords and members of Parliament, I decided to take a trip up to Loch Ness. And I must say, I took the midnight train from London. It is the most beautiful, scenic route, and I love the train, that I have ever been on. I mean, talk about the beauty of the land. On the way up to Inverness, it's just absolutely stunning. I've never seen anything like it before. I'd like to visit again, but it's a long trip here from the U.S. But anyway, I got to Loch Ness, and it was just at the end of the season, after what would be our Labor Day. It gets very damp and foggy, and most of the attractions and things to do up around Loch Ness sort of die out, and the tourists go away. So I was just at the end of the season, and I stayed at a very charming lady's bed and breakfast. And when she found out that I had spoken at the House of Lords, she insisted on introducing me to the local minister, the milkman, anybody she could find. And of course, we were we were within maybe about a mile of Loch Ness itself. And I mentioned people why I was there in England to speak, to House of Lords, and everybody told me there was a definite UFO connection to Loch Ness. Many of them saw it kind of as an extension of the dragon mythology of that part of the the United Kingdom. In fact, I understand on many cathedral walls, both inside and out, are shapes of dragons and discs. In fact, there's a book called Dragons and Discs by I believe it's H.W. Holiday. Do I have the
F.W. Holiday, I think.
Oh my goodness, I got it right. Jeez, what an obscure information I have. But anyway, he even talked about having Men in Black experiences where he would be down, at the edge of the loch, hoping to see, the Nessie, and he was being spied upon by these men dressed in black clothing. Off, behind some trees or off in the woods there. And I don't know why anybody would want to wear a black suit at Loch Ness. I mean, it just is, speaking of Loch Ness, here comes the rain, the storm and the rain clouds and the lightning. But we'll be back. Have no fear, because Champ is near.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Tim, they're talking about us again.
They are. I hope it's good things too.
Well, it sounds like it. And what a show tonight. I mean, this just is moving along. I mean, two of the most incredible subjects and some of the most fascinating guests. That's one thing here at Exploring the Bizarre. We don't chintz. We don't have one guest on. We bring in a panel discussion so that we can share ideas.
That's
and
right.
keep the ball rolling. It's just like being in my living room, but next week, Tim, I'm tired of cleaning up. It's going to be in your living room.
That's fine. That's fine. I've got the beer ready to go.
All right. And I'll bring the peanuts and the popcorn.
There you go.
But which brings me up to the conversation now. Okay, Jeff, what does Mothman eat?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, it is. I mean, you would think. Well, I remember there was one story. Didn't he try to kidnap a dog?
Well, what happened was there was a farmer up in Salem, West Virginia, on the 11th, or I'm sorry, the 14th of November. That's about 2 hours away from Point Pleasant, and he saw some strange lights in his backyard. The dog bolted out the door. They never seen the dog again. Well, the next night, which was November 15th, that's when Linda and the others saw this thing up in the T interior. Well, what they did tell the police was when they were on their way up to the T interior, they saw a large dog, a German Shepherd, laying by the road, right on the outskirts of town, right on the city limits, right there. That brought into speculation that may have been Merle Partridge's dog, which was 2 hours away in Salem, West Virginia. And even up until when he passed away, he believed that whatever this thing was could pick up a small animal or a dog or whatever. And but they noticed that the dog was gone when they came back into town after they had seen this Mothman or giant bird, whatever. And so that's how he got kind of thrown into the story and stuff. But a lot of people say, well, were there ever any droppings found or fur or feathers, things like that, And at that time, back in '66, even if Keel claimed to have seen a few footprints around the boiler room up there at the North Power Plant, but nobody took pictures. You didn't have the digital camera technology that you have now. Couldn't just get your cell phone out and take a few pictures of it. So,
well, are we talking now? Did it have feathers actually?
Some people described it as almost like bird-like, feathers. Other people I talked to, said almost like a leathery bat wing type feel to it.
And some people thought it was
people got that close to it.
Yeah.
The people.
But
that
some
were that
people
close
also
to it.
some people also thought it was a mechanical device.
Yeah. And, Partridge even told me, that what he saw in his backyard, the first thing I asked him is, in John Keel's book, he mentioned the red eyes. When I talked to Merle Partridge, he said, I didn't see red eyes. I saw mechanical red lights. That's the first thing he told me. And he said what I saw was mechanical. It was almost like spaceship type stuff,
Well, now that's interesting because that kind of brings back, Alan, wouldn't you say, visions of the Braxton County monster.
Exactly. And also notice that obviously we're talking about the same stimulus, but different people see it in different ways. Some people are mechanistic and they see it with mechanical eyes. Some people see it as bird-like. There was Pseudotriton ruber, as Gray so eloquently put it, the sandhill crane. Some people saw it as sort of like the Braxton Monster, but also sort of like the Jersey Devil. Was if you've seen descriptions of that, or perhaps seen it knocking on your door, although you're a little bit too far east for those visits. Nevertheless, I think people are seeing the same thing, but there aren't any droppings. There aren't any feathers. What we're seeing is something that is real, but that is molding itself to the expectations of the observer. It's stimulus and response a little bit different for each person. I suspect if you have a group of people that see it, if you really compared notes or put them in separate rooms and interviewed them, something not done back then, but worth doing, you would get slightly differing perspectives that would show that you're seeing the same thing in totally different ways. We did want to talk a little bit about the occult aspect of Nessie. Doesn't necessarily apply to any other lake monster. Lake Champlain is a very good place to look for something if it is a freshwater dolphin or some unknown creature, a physical creature or something, because the water is pretty clear if you dive. But Loch Ness is hopelessly, although long, it's relatively narrow, and it is very, very, very murky water, so it's very hard to find. But people have the Nessie sightings, and in the same place at different periods of time, you have the famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, magician Aleister Crowley becoming the Laird of Boleskine on Loch Ness. You have fairy mounds. Those are places where fairies are seen and said to be portals to other worlds on and around Loch Ness. There's a mountain there that is said to be like the Venusberg of Wagner and medieval legend, that if you go in it, you will meet the fairies, but if you come out, it'll be 100 years later. And the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, of which I am an initiate, was founded by a Scotsman named Peter Davidson, who lived on Loch Ness as well. So there's a definite occult connection there also. I mean, Crowley moved there for a reason. Not only that, but his followers, when they do their equivalent of worship, you're supposed to face Boleskine, even though the house burned down a couple of years ago. Nevertheless, you're supposed to have your temple and your rituals oriented towards Boleskine. That's and Boleskine is directly on Loch Ness.
But now, why? I mean, what is there a reason the house was put up? I mean, is that part of the enchantment?
Yes, I believe that's the. It was chosen to be the center of the Crowleyan, they call it Thelemic, that's sort of bad Greek for will, oriented magical religion. And that was the perfect place to be the center, because it is described in Crowley's Book of the Law, Liberal Vel Legis, as the place where you should enshrine the sacred objects of the Thelemic religion. It's like a lot of things, the Mormons have Salt Lake City, Jews like me have the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, I suppose to some extent so do Christians, and Muslims have Mecca. So there are a lot fewer Thelemites, for which we can all thank whatever deities we choose. But nevertheless, that is their center of worship. I don't know what they're doing now since the house burned down. I take it as a hint myself.
Well, do you know, when I was staying, I say at this bed and breakfast, the milkman stopped by. And okay, and
he asked to see your wife.
Well, she wasn't with me, but he told this very peculiar story. He said, "Oh, I know there's a rock and roller who lives across the the way," but he didn't know Led Zeppelin from a hole in the wall. He said, and I used to deliver milk on that side of the lock, but I won't go over there anymore. And I said, "Well, why might that be?" He says, "Well, my dog, I take my dog on my milk run every day, and normally he's very well behaved, but every time I would go past that establishment, the dwelling there, he would go absolutely bonkers and try to crawl under the front seat of the cab of the milk truck, and tore up the whole bottom of the van there. So the driver decided he didn't want to drive on that side of the lock anymore. So I took that as being a sign of some sort."
Yeah, I think that was probably during the Jimmy Page period. I have a friend and actually a classmate, Jack Hogg, who spent the night there because he knew Jimmy Page, and I guess that was like the Lincoln bedroom to the president. It was one of those privileges, and he said it was really weird staying there. And for Jack Hogg to say that it's really weird, it's got to be really weird.
There were some stories that literally heads were going to roll. There were sightings of heads rolling down the hallway. I don't know if somebody was decapitated or what, but a strange place indeed for whatever ritualistic purpose. But we're coming up actually within a few minutes of the close of the show, and it has been a humdinger. 1 if by air, 2 if by sea. And I do want to make the rounds of everybody here so that you have the opportunity to tell our vast audience what you're working on. And I think we'll start off with Jeff. What's going to happen this year at the festival?
Well, at the festival, we have all kinds of stuff like guest speakers, authors, merchandise vendors. We have live bands play all day. We have guided tours. We have bus tours that take
Hayride.
Yeah, the Hayride. Yeah, we do the Hayride, which we never have enough tickets for that. That sells out every year, and it's just a good meeting place for people that are interested in the UFOs, the Mothman, the paranormal, crypto.
And it's free. And it's free.
Yeah, it's all free. Yeah.
I don't understand that. It's free. What a novel idea! And this year you're going to have Nick Redford is speaking.
Yep. Yeah.
Nick, who has 2 new books that are out of sight.
Oh yeah. And Steve Ward will be one of the guides on the Hayride. Steve Ward will be on the Hayride as a tour guide. So
you guys have got to come to this festival. It's really, it's right up your alley. You'll just really love it.
And just see Terry Garr saying "roll, roll, roll in the hay."
That's not included, I'm afraid.
Oh.
And who else is speaking this year?
Rosemary Guiley will be there. Lauren Coleman will be there.
Stan Gordon.
Stan Gordon. Yeah, Steve. You know, I can't even think of all the different ones that we have.
I know. I was impressed by the list. You know, it's
yeah.
Is it financed by the Chamber of Commerce?
No, it's financed by me.
Oh, well, then you are the Chamber of.
Yeah, I usually lose a little bit on it, but you know, it's my civic duty, I think.
Well, you know, I don't know too many people here who've ever. We've all put on UFO conferences of one type or another, and meeting our nut has always been a problem. Sometimes we come closer to it than at other times. A couple of events we did all right, but and Kate up there in Rhode Island, when is your next expedition to look for Champ?
It's actually next week, so I'm really excited to. I have so much equipment that I've had a lot of equipment for quite some time, since 2012, but the equipment cases are getting fuller and fuller. So I just spent a boatload, no pun intended, of money on a thermal camera. We have the underwater fish camera. We have the hydrophone, of course, that we captured the audio recordings. We also have a new sonar that I'm extremely excited to try out. So yeah, that's our expedition. That's going to be next week. And we'll also be going to Lake Willoughby and Lake Memphremagog one of those days out of the week-long expedition. So that should be interesting. We're going to
you take your boat out of the. You even have a name for the boat, right?
I do. It's called Champ Tanny, which is a name, Champ Tannystropheus. It's based on the idea of Champ being a Tannystropheus, which is a ancient reptile, much like the plesiosaur, but with an extremely longer neck, and it has feet, not flippers. So that's the name of the boat. And I'm not going to take the boat to Lake Willoughby and Memphremagog. I actually have a huge blow-up boat that I'm going to be taking with me just for that this year.
Well, you better be taking a camera and recording all this.
Oh, I'll have my new GoPro Silver 4 that I just bought too. That's another thing that I got.
You know, this is documentary time.
Yes, it is.
I mean, really, you know, I mean, this is worth. Well, I was going to say National Geographic, but that's a joke. You ain't never going to get them to play.
Yeah, no.
The program. I mean, they did one pro. They did a thing on the Brown Mountain Lights, and it was so good they only played it once. They never even repeated it. You know, I mean, with Joshua Pete Warren, and they had actual videotapes of the Brown Mountain Lights, and I guess they couldn't poo-poo it enough, and so they never showed it. They'd start out, you know, the first 15 minutes to get the audience excited about something, and then they'd bring on the skeptics and show how it was the planet Venus or something.
It's all 17 planet Venuses, which is
there are, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of more Velikovskian than anyway. So what?
Yeah, and in a book, you have a book coming. You all have a book. So, Kate, what you have a book out now?
Yes, I have a book out now called Waterhorse of Lake Champlain 2. And that one is available on Amazon.com, as well as my website, which you have posted if anybody wants to check that out.
Oh, you got to! I insist that our listeners go to your website, officialchampsearch.web.com. There's a link right there on the page. Tina's given us a direct link from the page for the show tonight, and you can see the videos of Champ. Absolutely amazing, and I just wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
I mean, when I saw this, I said, "Got to get this gal on the show."
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on the show.
Oh, I'll keep calling. I'll keep Facebooking, whatever they call it. And Allen, I know you've always got something in there. You've got a chicken in every pot.
Yes, I do, but I'm still getting really good sales on the Complete Ride of Memphis, which is available on Amazon, and I don't know where else because they don't tell me all these things. And There is a new, I hear, because I haven't even seen it, a newer than new from a new publisher who has yet to send me a copy or copies for my friends. Combined edition of the complete, the Complete Rite of Memphis, plug. No, Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts and Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, combined in one edition with a new introduction, not by me, by somebody that the publisher assigned to it. So I can't yet, say anything about it except that it's out there, and it should be available very shortly if it isn't already.
You can get it certainly. Is part of our Angel Spells book. I mean, it's,
Angel Spells. Well, that has the first book in it.
Yes.
But this is the combination of the two. I wrote them at the same time. They were meant to be part of a trilogy that was never finished. The third volume is Secret Teachings of the Inner Order, but that isn't going to ever be written. Not in my lifetime, anyway.
And Steve, what's your take on all of this? I know you're going to be heading the hayride at the festival.
Yes, Jeff was mentioning some of the speakers. We've got A-list speakers. There are also speakers that are a little more regional or local. Jeff has put together a phenomenal museum. It's really professionally done, covering all the folklore and history of all the stuff that went on there. And I hope Jeff is going to plug his 2 books, which are also excellent. Mm-hmm. But the hayride, I tell you what, if you come to the festival, it culminates on Saturday night on the hayride, where you go into the dreaded TNT area in the dark of night.
Who's going to come with me on the hayride?
Well, Jeff's got one wagon. I've got another. It's going to be will Miss Mothman be doing the 3rd wagon this year, Jeff?
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I talked to her today. Yeah.
So you can have a gorgeous young lady guide you around, or maybe a couple guys, or maybe a little long in the tooth. But anyway, you will be.
I have it on good authority that Indrid Cold will be there in disguise.
He might be, but you will be confronted by dreaded men in black. Will try to keep you out of there, and if you're lucky, there may be a flyover of the Mothman.
And there is an Indrid Cold.
Yes.
I know?
Yeah. There's an Indrid Cold on our. I've been trying to get him on the show. There is a fellow by the name of Indrid Cold who's on our Facebook friend list.
I think he's. I forget what his real name is, but
Santa. His last name is Santa.
I know you're talking about. Yeah.
But isn't that an anagram for Satan?
Well, we'll ask his wife, okay? And
the wife of Satan. That was a Hammer film.
So that's September 17th and
18th. Third week in September. Also, you can hear me weekly on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files on the Radioactive Broadcasting Company.
And Tina, who is our producer, Tina Marie, she's having, I understand, Nick Redford on tomorrow night on her show, Restricted Airspace. So everybody is keeping busy. I want everybody to get out their credit card, go to PayPal, and buy a couple of books. 3 from me, 2 from Allen. In fact, I had somebody the other day order 10 books from us. We've got 287 or something like that. So
don't be fooled. Get the Complete Rite of Memphis revised edition. The earlier edition sells for an outrageous amount of money, none of which I get.
And next week, we are having Starseed Transmission. That is, if April Plummer is talking to me, because apparently I told her the show was tonight. I'm not sure I did, but yeah, we'll have to. We'll make it up to her somehow.
We have a week's time to soothe her.
Yeah. She's a lovely gal, and it's going to be a great topic. And Tim, why don't you take us towards the highway?
Well, I think that before we go, Tim, that we need to plug our most recent magazine.
Oh, my God, yes.
Yeah.
UFO Review Special 1, Project Alien Mind Control. It is the only magazine book issued on a regular basis, printed book magazine in the United States in English. There ain't no other. And it's going to be a quarterly or at least 3 times a year, and we promise some of the most excellent writing like you were used to seeing in the original UFO review, the tabloid UFO universe. We're going to bring all our writers back, and we're going to have a hell of a time, just like we did tonight. And as we roll down the highway on another hayride or get on board the Champ Mobile, I want to thank you all for being with us. And here comes the storm. I can hear it coming over the mountains.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.